I hear that you're sort of into design tokens. Um,
Yes.
and I was wondering how you would suggest someone get started. Like if they have the beginning as a design system, they're like, tokens sound great. How could they start incorporating them or start using them?
I hope everyone's already familiar with design tokens. Just in case you're not, I'll briefly discuss what they are. Most people think of them as variables. So if you have all your colors, all your font sizes, your spacing values, and so on stored as variables, then you're already most of the way there. Design tokens was an abstraction layer on top of variables. So it's a little bit more than just that. You can scale your design to native platforms and not just the web. So you might have Android, or you might have iOS, or even possibly print or other things that are not necessarily web-based. So it's a way to distribute your design to all these different platforms. There's a lot of articles out right now. Some of the ones that I think are good, Nathan Curtis probably wrote one of the earlier articles about them when he found out about them from the Lightning Design System website. And so I think he just calls his article on Medium Tokens and Design Systems. That one kind of explains like the gist of how they work, and also kind of has his own opinion on how he sets things up. I don't like the title of this article, but there's an article called Design Tokens for Dummies explaining the foundations of them and what they are. There's also a CSS tricks article. I do have a class that I taught for the All You Can Learn library on UIE's website. I do have some talks that I plan to give this year as well, and I'm also working on a book about design tokens, but those aren't really available right now. So there's a talk that I saw Stu Robson give. He does a pretty good job of it, explaining his take on how he would approach design tokens. Now, a lot of these things are more from an engineering perspective, how to distribute those variables across your different code bases. I haven't seen too many articles that are coming more from the designer's perspective, and that's where I'm hoping to add more content around that. We have the Design Tokens community group that is working on trying to standardize this process so that other design tools that are adopting design token can use that, so that how you use design tokens in those products are how you would expect to use them. In terms of design tools that have them right now, Envision's DSM has it, but the last I saw, it was just color and type. I don't know if they've added beyond that yet. I heard Figma's supposed to be implementing it. I heard XD is supposed to be implementing it. Some modules has it too. So a lot of tools are starting to actually integrate this on the design side of things, which is really cool.
So how do you think a design system teams plays in like influencing a suite of applications overall experience larger than just the individual components? You kind of err on the side of creating smaller atomic level components, or do you think a systems team should work with the products they're supporting to address some of those larger scale experiences, such as like wizard workflows?
I personally think that they should be involved on both sides of that. So the way things worked at Salesforce, where I used to work, we had our design systems team, and of course we were working on the small atomic UI elements like buttons and tabs and things like that. But we also partnered with design teams because everything that we were doing was directly related to things that were coming out in the product. Like we weren't going to just build UI components unless they were directly related to a feature that was going out to our customers. When it came to things like we need a new wizard to step a customer through this process, then we would work very closely with that team to develop together what that wizard would look like, what the different permutations of that wizard would be, and then look at how other teams that are facing the same type of problem might be able to also adopt that wizard. It's sort of a partnership. There's an article I wrote that was responding to one Nathan wrote. Nathan wrote one called The Team Models of a Design System. I forget the exact title. I'll get all these links for you. And then I wrote one that was basically Salesforce's way. So we had I called it a cyclical process. So everything that we built and documented was informing the product design, but the product design that our other designers were working on was informing the design system. So it was like this very cyclical process. I think that that is the best way, because if you're just building out components for the sake of building out components, it's generally helpful, but I think it's more meaningful when you're directly relating that to actual features that are going out to your customers and to your users.
There's a lot of great tooling out there for documenting component libraries, right? Like Storybook, for example, Docs, obviously very popular. They're great for, again, the component level documentation, but when it comes to the design documentation, here's all of our tokens, here's our best practices for typography, spacing, so on. What's been your experience? What do you recommend? And what have you seen that's trending?
I think Storybook is a great tool, but it only goes so far. It's really awesome at documenting all the different variations of your component, all the different states. And I think that is something some designers tend to neglect sometimes in their documentation. So it helps surface those things. But there's still a need for more higher level documentation that's beyond click states and open states and all that. I think it's really good to open up that documentation to everyone. Sometimes that means if you're putting everything inside your code base, let's say you're using React to generate your style guide, that might not necessarily be accessible to some of your designers that maybe aren't quite savvy and pulling down the code base, documenting their components, design guidelines, and then uploading that back to whatever your system is, like if you're doing it on GitHub or whatever. So what we did was we tried to find a way to open that up to more people. And so we had an area of our documentation site that was basically coming from a different source. In Salesforce's case, what we were doing at the time, it was still GitHub focused, but it was using markdown files because all of our team did have access to at least going to the GitHub repos website, going to the markdown file, hitting edit, and then writing the documentation there. That was the process that made sense for us. I have seen other teams take it a step further and not even use GitHub at all. So when I was at Amazon, there was a team there that was actually using Quip, which is coincidentally is also a tool by Salesforce. It kind of feels like Notion or like a nicer version of Google Docs. It's very easy to type your documentation up, just like you're doing any sort of word processor. Then that was being pulled in through the API into the documentation site. And so everybody, designers, product managers, whoever could write documentation in this place that felt very easy to use to them. And then behind the scenes, we were basically pulling that content directly into the website. Yeah, I've seen people use Dropbox Paper to do this. I've seen people use Notion. So it does take a little bit of time to set that up, but once you do have that set up, it can be really easy for anyone to access that.
How would you explain to a non-technical person the benefits of a design system for the company? And I would say a very non-technical person. How would you pitch the benefits of doing a design system to that person?
I think there's a few ways you could do that. Metaphors are a very easy tool and one that I tend to fall back on. There's the cooking example. You could kind of wing it in the kitchen, grabbing whatever you want. But if you already know what you want to build, then a lot of people that are cooking are going to grab all the things that they need, set it up and get prepped and ready, and then they'll make the thing. If you watch any cooking show, usually they already have certain things prepared or ready to go and just speed up the process of showing how to make whatever thing it is they're making. Another example is construction. You're usually going to have your blueprints, you're going to have all your materials, everything that you need ready to go before you just start building the house. If you're going to start building the house without all that, you're probably going to have some weird Winchester mystery house looking thing that's just kind of weird and bizarre. Basically, I would fall back on metaphors like that. When it comes to building products, there are teams that wing it and they go as far as they go and they go as fast as they go. But if you have these things prepped and ready, it enables you to ship faster and get things to users quicker. So that's how I'll explain it to people. If you're watching old Bob Ross episodes, I used to watch that with my grandma growing up. He kind of winged it, but he had a system in place. Anytime he would do a tree or anytime he would do a mountain or clouds, if you watch all his episodes, he has a very standard way of doing trees and a standard way of doing clouds, hills and mountains and things like that. Because he had time-tested techniques that he knew and had in place, then it would look like he was winging it, but really he was using sort of this underlying system that he always fell back to. Jim Kalbeck was speaking at Design Ops Summit, and he started his talk bringing up an upright bass and started playing bass, and he had these other people join him on stage, and they just started playing jazz music. And it was good. Everybody was nodding their heads and enjoying it. And then he explained to the audience that they had never practiced together before. And the reason that they were able to do that was that jazz is essentially a pattern library. Once you understand the patterns and the structures, then it enables you to be creative very effectively and very efficiently, and still allow room to be experimental and creative. And I thought that was an amazing example. And I like to reference it a lot because it was just like, oh my gosh, that's genius. So that's kind of how I would do it if I'm talking to somebody that's not in our world of building products. I would use metaphors. It's really the only technique I think I would use in this situation, because people get that. People get metaphors, and they know what Bob Ross is. They know what jazz is. They can understand through that.
If we get through all this
If
stuff, when we do, I will be more positive. When we do, I'm bringing my shirt to Clarity with all the names on it. So if you're bringing your shirt, I'll bring my shirt and get a picture with you and at Clarity.
Yeah. So the shirt he's referencing is he did this shirt design that has women who are engineers or developers, and then the proceeds went to Black Girls Code and Girls Who Code.
I was interested in the Design System Coalition, where you guys were doing the meetups. Of course, now's not the time of meetups, but I've seen them moving to virtual meetups. If the Design System Coalition was still active and the possibility of extending it over to the East Coast.
The Design Systems Coalition is a meetup I started in San Francisco. We basically have a company host the meetup, and then they really show what they're working on. And the caveat being, we all are here because we already know what a design system is, and you don't need to explain that, but maybe share with us something unique that you're facing that we can take away. There is a New York chapter that spun up from Diana Mounter, and she operates a little differently. She actually has 2 to 3 talks by different people from different companies, where I tend to focus on whichever company is hosting. I have been reached out to by a lot of people that want to start chapters, and I think that's awesome. My thing was I wanted to create a set of guidelines around, if you are going to use the name to run your meetup, please follow these guidelines so that there's a level of quality and a good experience that people can expect of a meetup that uses that name. I just hadn't had the chance to put those guidelines together yet. It is on my list of things. I would love to get that rolling out. Of course, right now, hosting at companies is not really the best option, so they would probably need to air on digital. And what intrigues me about that is, if it's digital, you don't need to be locked into a city. And if that's the case, how can we extend the brand to these different chapters in a way that it does feel cohesive, but we're not competing? Because there's so many meetups happening online right now. How do we make this one that's actually very helpful and useful for the community? Anybody can create a design system meetup. It's just when you're using that name, I just want people to have a certain quality that is met. It's a brand thing.
How are you? And I hope that you're doing well.
I'm doing as well as I can right now. I lost all my contracts that I had in place, which is why I'm looking for other ways. Ask Me Anything are only $5, so they're not really going to pay my rent. They'll help with expenses and stuff. So I'm hoping that these do well. I've had some loss, unfortunately. It's just trying to keep my head up and keep moving. And I don't buy into all the life coaches that are, be productive, this is your best time. I'm trying to be as productive as I can be while being sane and trying to hold on to my mental health and all that. So thank you for asking.